Snow fell in silence over the small town, softening edges, hiding footprints, pretending the past didn't exist. Inside the community clinic, though, nothing was erased. Everything stayed. Everything left a mark. It was a night shift. The main hallway felt like a tunnel of cold light and urgency. Gurney wheels squeaked, gloves snapped, a heart monitor beeped without mercy. Someone said, "Pressure's dropping." Someone answered, "Bring the crash cart." And in the middle of the chaos, there was one figure who didn't run, yet made the chaos obey. Ava moved down the corridor with steady steps. White coat, hair tied back in a hurry, eyes sharp. She carried the kind of authority that didn't need to get louder to be heard. People stepped aside instinctively, as if they already knew. When she arrives, things start working again. On the emergency room door, a new plaque gleamed under the ceiling lights. Head of Department, Dr. Ava Hart. That wasn't just a title, it was a price. Code Blue, Room 2. Ava walked in. The patient was an older man with calloused hands, skin drained of color, his body surrendering. The monitor screamed. The team hovered at the edge of training and fear. Ava took command with the exact calm of someone who had learned to save lives, even when no one had saved hers. Compressions. Epinephrine. Again. Time didn't pass in that room. It fought. When the rhythm returned, the air shifted. A collective exhale, a trapped sob escaping. Ava pulled off her gloves and washed her hands, staring at her reflection in the steel sink for a brief second, like she needed proof she was still whole. She looked unbreakable, but there was a scar inside her that had never fully closed. A scar that didn't come from night shifts. It came from absence. From a day she waited and learned that some people don't leave with a goodbye. Some people leave with silence. Ava stepped out and returned to the hallway, already bracing for the next call. But before she could take 3 steps, the intercom announced something else. All available physicians to the conference room. Urgent leadership meeting. An urgent meeting at that hour was never good news. The team gathered with paper cups of coffee, exhausted eyes, and that quiet irritation that comes from giving everything you have and being asked for more. Ava walked in last. She took her seat near the head of the table like always. Not out of ego, out of responsibility. She was the one who held the clinic together when everything threatened to collapse. The board president looked more nervous than he wanted to appear. Papers shook slightly in his hands. He swallowed before speaking. "Thank you for coming. I know this was last minute, but we need to share something important." A few murmurs. An older physician frowned. A nurse crossed her arms. Ava didn't move. Directors came and went. She stayed. That was the unwritten rule here. The man took a breath. Starting this week, the clinic will have a new director. Silence. Ava remained still, face unreadable. The kind of stillness that only belongs to someone who's been blindsided by life too many times to react early. The president scanned the room as if searching for approval. He's coming from the city, nationally recognized, and he insisted on taking charge of this unit personally. A thin sheet of ice seemed to slide across Ava's chest, too fast to explain. It wasn't fear. It was instinct, like some old, locked-away part of her had just woken up. The president straightened the papers, lifted his chin, and smiled like it had all been rehearsed. "Please and welcome our new director." He paused, brief, deliberate, and then announced in a clear voice, "Dr. Maycon Smith. May, if you want to see Ava's reaction and what this return will change, subscribe now and stay with us until the end." Snow kept falling over the small town like a quiet warning. Inside the conference room, no one moved. No one breathed right. Ava stayed seated, posture straight, hands still on the table. Only her eyes shifted, slowly, toward the doorway. She didn't rush the moment. She didn't offer it permission. She simply waited, as if she'd learned to meet shocks without flinching. And the room waited with her, trapped in the pause. The door opened with a soft click that sounded too small for what it carried. A few staff members leaned forward like they expected a hero. Others folded their arms, skeptical, tired of promises from outsiders. Ava didn't lean. She didn't fold. She didn't smile. Her expression remained calm, so calm It could be mistaken for indifference. But under that calm, something old tightened, sharp, and familiar. The past had a way of returning in professional clothing. Maycon stepped in wearing a dark coat dusted with snow. He looked polished, city-made, the kind of man whose life was scheduled. His hair was neat, his jaw set, his hands steady as he greeted the room. He offered firm handshakes and controlled warmth, practiced, believable. He looked at faces like he was already memorizing them. Then his gaze lifted, inevitably, toward the head of the table, and everything in him slowed, just for a second. Ava met his eyes without standing. No anger, no softening. No surprise she would give him the satisfaction of. Her stare was clean, direct, almost clinical, like she was evaluating a case. Maycon's mouth opened as if her name still belonged to him, but nothing came out. He swallowed, the motion visible in his throat. The board president kept smiling, unaware of the fracture he'd just exposed. In that moment, Maycon realized the room wasn't the challenge. Ava was. "Dr. Maycon," the president said, gesturing proudly. "Welcome home." Home. The word hit wrong. It always had. Maycon had built his success on leaving places before they could leave him. He had convinced himself he was returning to lead, to fix, to restore. But Ava's stillness said something else. You don't get to return untouched. Not after you chose silence. Not after you let time do the dirty work. Not after you made someone rebuild their life without you. Around the table, introductions began. Names, roles, departments. Maycon nodded at each one, the perfect director, the perfect resume. Ava listened like she was hearing weather updates. Relevant, not personal. When it was her turn, the president's voice grew louder with pride. "And this is Dr. Ava Hart, head of department, our backbone." A few people smiled toward her. A nurse gave a small approving nod. Macon's eyes flickered, and for the first time, he looked almost ashamed. Ava spoke with professional clarity. "Welcome, Dr. Maycon," she said, tone neutral, measured. No warmth, no bitterness, nothing he could hold on to or fight against. She offered her hand across the table like a formality, not forgiveness. Maycon took it carefully as if afraid she'd pull away and embarrass him. Her grip was firm, brief, and gone before he could pretend it meant more. The message landed without drama. She wasn't his story anymore. The meeting moved forward. Budgets, staffing, protocols, goals for the quarter. Maycon asked sharp questions, the right ones, impressing the room. He spoke about efficiency, patient outcomes, community trust. He sounded like someone who believed leadership could replace love. Ava took notes, eyes occasionally lifting to test his consistency. He avoided looking at her too long, like eye contact could crack him open. And Ava noticed that too. When the board dismissed them, chairs scraped back and the room released a breath. Staff members clustered in small groups, whispering about the big city director. Maycon smiled politely, thanked people, shook more hands. Ava gathered her folder and stood without hurry. She moved toward the door as if the moment had already passed. But Maycon stepped closer, just enough to block her path politely. "Ava," he said quietly, like the name was a prayer he'd practiced. She didn't stop walking. She stopped existing in his pace. Her eyes met his again. Calm, distant, controlled. "Dr. Maycon," she corrected, voice soft, not unkind. The correction wasn't about rank. It was about distance. It was about boundaries built brick by brick over years. Macon's expression tightened, not from anger, more from regret. "I'd like to talk," he said. "Just for a minute." Ava's phone vibrated. An incoming call from the ER. She glanced at the screen and slipped it into her pocket. "Patients first," she replied, already turning away. Maycon followed one step, careful not to chase too obviously. "I came back because..." he started, and the words died when she didn't slow. Ava paused only to open the hallway door, letting cold air rush in. "Whatever your reason is," she said, "it can wait." The corridor swallowed them in fluorescent light and hurried footsteps. A nurse called Ava's name, relief visible on her face. Ava nodded once and moved faster, instantly back in command. Maycon watched her shift into leadership like it was muscle memory. In the city, he'd been respected. Here, Ava was depended on. That difference hit him harder than any resume ever had. He had come back as director, yet she was the center of the clinic. In the ER, a young woman cried beside an exam bed, hands shaking. Ava approached with gentle precision, lowering her voice. She asked questions, checked vitals, reassured with competence, not cliches. Maycon stood a few steps behind, observing the rhythm of her work. She didn't look to him for confirmation. She didn't share control. She carried the room the way some people carry faith, quietly, fully, and it made him remember the Ava he once loved and the one he lost. Later in the break room, Ava poured coffee that tasted like burnt endurance. Her hands were steady, but her mind wasn't empty. She had heard his voice say her name, and it echoed too easily. Not because she missed him, because memory has sharp edges. She remembered the nights he vanished behind ambition, the messages that slowed, the calls that stopped, the silence that replaced truth. And she reminded herself, peace is not negotiable. Maycon entered the break room like someone approaching an operating room. Careful, respectful, almost afraid. He didn't stand too close. He didn't block the exit this time. "I'm not here to disrupt your life," he said. Ava sipped her coffee, eyes on the wall, giving him no comfort. "You're already here," she replied. "That's disruption enough." The honesty landed clean, without cruelty. He nodded slowly, as if he deserved the cut. "I know I hurt you," he said, "and I know sorry isn't—" Ava raised a hand, stopping him without raising her voice. "No," she said. "You don't get to open that door in a break room." Maycon's eyes lowered, and for a moment he looked smaller than his title. Ava set her cup down with control. "We have rules here. Professionalism is one of them." His jaw tightened, not with anger, but with the effort of staying. In the past, he would have left when things got uncomfortable. That was his pattern, exit before exposure. But now he stayed standing there, taking the boundary like medicine. "Tell me what you need from me," he said. As director, Ava finally looked at him fully, measuring the sincerity. "What I need," she said, "is for you to do your job and not make this about you." Maycon nodded again, and the room between them filled with unsaid history. Ava picked up her folder and walked out first, as she always did now. Maycon watched her go, feeling the weight of something he couldn't buy back. Outside, snow pressed against the windows like quiet persistence. He had returned with status, authority, and a polished title. But the one thing he came for, her trust, was nowhere in his hands. And for the first time, Maycon understood. This time, he would have to earn every inch. The next morning arrived wrapped in gray light and quiet snow. The clinic looked peaceful from the outside, almost gentle. Inside, Ava's day began the way it always did, before her coffee cooled. A chart review, a staffing issue, 2 urgent consults waiting. She moved through it with practiced focus, refusing to name the ache under her ribs, because naming it would make it real again, and she had worked too hard to outgrow the past. Maycon showed up early too, earlier than anyone expected of a director. He wore the same controlled expression, but his eyes looked tired. Not sleepless, tired, regret tired, the kind that doesn't heal with rest. He greeted the front desk staff by name already, surprising them. He asked where supplies were stored, how triage flowed, what broke most often. No speeches, no ego, just attention. Ava heard about it through the hallway like distant weather. At 7:12 a.m., a nurse caught Ava near the nurses' station. "Dr. Hart," she whispered. "The new director asked for your protocols." Ava didn't react. "Send them," she replied, flipping a page on her clipboard. The nurse hesitated. "He said he wants to learn how you run things." Ava's pen paused for half a second, then moved again. "He can read," she said flatly. "That's what directors do." But inside, a thought flashed. He's trying. That doesn't mean he deserves anything. In Maycon's office, the walls were still bare. No awards displayed, no city skyline art. He had asked for nothing except a working desk and the clinic's performance reports. He read through Ava's departmental protocols like they were scripture. Clear, efficient, compassionate without softness. He could see her fingerprint on every system. This place hadn't survived because of donors or luck. It survived because Ava had refused to let it die. Between meetings, Maycon's phone buzzed, an unknown city number. He stared at it a beat too long before silencing it. Ava passed his open door at that exact moment. She didn't stop, but she noticed the way his hand tightened around the phone. Not fear of a call, fear of what the call represented. The same hunger that once pulled him away from her. The same old door he'd chosen before. The memory hit Ava without permission. A younger Ava, still a resident, still hopeful. A late night in the OR lounge, fluorescent lights buzzing above them. Maycon washing his hands, sleeves rolled up, looking like calm itself. He had smiled at her then. Rare, private. You're going to be extraordinary, he'd told her. Promise me you won't settle. She had laughed softly, hiding how much she wanted to believe him. And for a while she did. Back then, their love was made of stolen minutes. A glance held too long over a chart. A touch on the elbow to guide her through a tense procedure. Coffee left on her desk with no note because notes were dangerous. And nights in the parking lot where the winter air kept their secrets. He'd kissed her like he was afraid of his own feelings. And Ava had mistaken fear for depth. The day the promotion came, it didn't arrive like a blessing. It arrived like an order. Maycon had answered the call in the corridor, voice low, eyes shifting. When he hung up, he looked at Ava as if the floor had moved. City General wants me, he said quietly. It's everything. Ava had smiled because she loved him, because she was proud. Then she asked the only question that mattered. And us? He didn't answer her. Not right away. He turned his gaze toward the glass doors leading out to the parking lot. I need time, he said, like love was a decision he could schedule. Ava's throat tightened, but she nodded anyway. She told herself he was processing, that he would choose them. She didn't know he was already practicing how to leave, and Maycon, even then, was afraid of the kind of love that demands staying. In the present, Ava snapped back when her pager went off. A pediatric asthma attack in room 4. She moved instantly, pushing memory behind her like a closed door. Maycon appeared at the doorway a moment later, already gloved, already ready. Not to take over, just to assist. Ava gave short instructions. He followed them without question. The team noticed. Ava noticed more. The child's breathing eased after treatment, tears drying on flushed cheeks. The mother thanked Ava again and again, voice breaking. Ava nodded, softening only for the patient, never for the moment. Maycon watched the way she crouched to the child's level, calm and gentle. He remembered how she used to look at him like that, open, trusting. Now she reserved that tenderness for people who didn't abandon her. And he understood. He had trained her to protect what he used to receive freely. Afterward, Maycon caught Ava in the hall, not blocking her, just walking beside her. I'm not here to make you uncomfortable, he said, keeping his voice low. Ava didn't look at him. Then don't, she replied. He swallowed. I want to do this right. The clinic, the leadership. She finally glanced at him, expression unreadable. Do you know what right is? She asked. Her tone wasn't cruel. It was diagnostic. He hesitated too long. And Ava saw it, the same delay that had once shattered her life. Right wasn't a concept to be debated. Right was a decision. She turned toward the nurse's station. Right is consistency, she said. Right is what you do when no one's praising you. Maycon nodded slowly, absorbing every word like a sentence. I'm here, he said. I'm staying. Ava's mouth tightened, just slightly. We'll see. By noon, the clinic buzzed with a different kind of tension. A rumor had started in the waiting area, carried by a familiar voice. A local reporter, small town, hungry for stories, had recognized Maycon's name. Is it true the famous Dr. Maycon is running this place now? She asked loudly. Patients turned their heads. Staff stiffened. Ava's shoulders stayed level, but her pulse quickened. Public attention was the last thing she needed. The reporter pushed again. smiling too brightly. Why would someone like him leave the city to come back here? Ava heard the question like a blade, because it wasn't really about the clinic. It was about the story people wanted: redemption, scandal, romance, drama. Ava stepped forward before Maycon could answer. "This is a medical facility," she said. Not a headline. Maycon surprised her by not playing the hero. He didn't charm the reporter. He didn't name-drop accomplishments. He simply said, "We're here to treat people. That's it." The reporter's smile faltered, disappointed. Ava watched him hold the boundary, hold it cleanly. It was the first time she saw him choose restraint instead of image. It didn't soften her, but it unsettled her. Late afternoon brought a meeting request from the board. Maycon read the email, jaw tightening. Ava caught a glimpse of the subject line as she passed. Restructuring proposal. She stopped just long enough to feel the warning rise in her chest. Restructuring meant cuts. Cuts meant losing the program she fought to build. Maycon looked up, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I haven't agreed to anything," he said, as if he could read her fear. Ava studied him like she studied lab results, searching for hidden danger. "Good," she replied, "because I won't let them dismantle this place." Maycon nodded once, steady. "Neither will I." Outside, snow pressed against the windows, quiet and relentless. Ava turned away first, because she refused to need his support. But as she walked back into the hall, one thought followed her like a shadow. If he truly stays when it gets hard, what does that change? By the time the board meeting began, the snow had thickened outside the clinic. It clung to the windows like a warning that wouldn't let go. Inside the conference room, heat hummed through old vents, but tension stayed cold. Ava arrived with a folder under her arm and silence in her posture. Maycon was already there, standing instead of sitting, hands clasped behind his back. He looked calm the way people look calm right before they decide something dangerous. The board members filed in with smiles that never reached their eyes. The president opened with compliments. Community impact, improved outcomes, rising trust. Then he slid a printed document across the table as if it were inevitable. "Restructuring," he said, voice smooth. "Optimization." Ava didn't touch the paper. She didn't need to. She could smell what it was. Numbers used as permission to cut what wasn't profitable. Programs that kept the poor alive, because compassion had no revenue column. She watched Maycon's face, waiting to see if he would call it what it was. A board member with polished nails tapped a section of the proposal. "The outreach clinic is costly," she said. "And the free medication program?" Her tone made charity sound like a personal flaw. Ava's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed measured. "That program prevents ER overload," she replied. "It saves lives and resources." The woman smiled, dismissive. "Lives don't always balance budgets, doctor." Maycon's eyes narrowed slightly, the first crack in his controlled expression. Another member leaned forward. "We believe this clinic needs a stronger brand." Brand. Ava hated the word in this room more than any diagnosis she'd ever given. They weren't selling shoes. They were holding a town together. The president turned to Maycon, inviting him to lead. "You have experience with high-level institutions," he said warmly. "Help us modernize. Make this place competitive." Ava felt the familiar dread. This was the moment men like Maycon used to choose power. Maycon looked down at the document, then up at the board, then, briefly, at Ava. Not for permission, not for reassurance, but as if he needed to face the person he once failed before he spoke. The room waited for him to agree, to play the role they'd hired him for. Ava stayed still, refusing to hope, refusing to fear. Hope was how you got hurt. But Maycon's voice came out steady, and it cut through the room. "We're not cutting the outreach clinic," he said. The board president blinked, startled by the bluntness. Maycon continued, calm but firm. "It's the spine of this place." The woman with polished nails let out a small laugh. "Spine or not, it's expensive." Maycon didn't smile back. "Then we fix funding," he replied. "Not the mission." Ava's eyes flickered, just slightly. More surprise than gratitude. Maycon saw it, and something in him tightened like resolve. The president tried a different angle. "We can't operate on ideals." Maycon leaned forward, placing his hand flat on the proposal. "No," he said quietly, "but we can't operate without ethics." Silence landed hard. Ava watched the board members exchange looks, annoyed, calculating. Macon's tone stayed even. "If you want to build a clinic that profits off pain, hire someone else." It wasn't dramatic. That was what made it dangerous. Ava spoke for the first time, voice low and precise. "The outreach clinic is why patients trust us," she said. "The free medication program is why families don't lose everything to one diagnosis." A board member sighed like she was tired of compassion. Maycon turned toward Ava. Not touching, not crowding, just acknowledging. "We can audit spending," he offered. "We can improve supply chains. We can bring partners." He paused. "But we will not punish the people we're here to serve." Ava's chest tightened, and she hated that it did. The meeting ended without agreement. The board promised to revisit numbers, which meant they would return with sharper knives. As chairs scraped back, the president pulled Maycon aside, voice low. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he warned. Maycon nodded once as if he'd expected the threat. Ava gathered her folder and headed for the door, not looking back. She didn't want Maycon to see the tremor inside her that said, "He stood up." She didn't want to give him the power of that. In the hallway, Maycon caught up beside her, matching her pace without forcing it. "That proposal was a trap," Ava said, eyes forward. Maycon exhaled. "I know," he replied. Ava finally glanced at him, a quick, sharp look. "And you still chose to fight." Macon's voice softened, but he kept it controlled. "I'm not here to repeat my life," he said. Ava's mouth tightened. "Words are easy," she answered. He nodded. "Then judge me by what's hard." The sentence hung between them like a challenge neither could ignore. That afternoon, the clinic tested them again. A multi-car accident on the highway flooded the ER with injuries. The waiting room filled with blood and winter coats and panicked voices. Ava took control instantly, triage priorities, orders snapping into place. Maycon stepped in without competing, without performing. He asked one question, "Where do you need me?" Ava pointed, "Trauma Bay, and don't waste time." In Trauma Bay, a teenage boy gasped for air, ribs rising unevenly. His mother shook, pleading, her hands gripping the bed rail. Maycon moved with precision, calling out interventions, steadying the room. Ava worked beside him, their rhythm almost automatic like it used to be, but cleaner now. No glances that lingered, no touches that meant more than medicine. Just two doctors doing what they did best, keeping someone alive. And still, the space between them felt loud. When the boy stabilized, the mother collapsed into tears. Ava spoke gently, explaining the next steps, giving hope without lies. Maycon stood back, watching Ava hold the woman's fear like it was something sacred. He remembered how Ava once held his fear too, quietly, faithfully. He hadn't protected that gift. He'd taken it. Now he saw the cost in her eyes. Tenderness was rationed now, carefully measured. And Maycon realized he wasn't competing with another man, he was competing with her peace. Later, as the ER calmed, Maycon found Ava by the supply room. He didn't step too close. He didn't try to make it personal. "I meant what I said," he told her. "Judge me by what's hard." Ava didn't soften. "Then start here," she replied. She handed him a list. Staffing gaps, equipment issues, a backlog of cases. "This is what leadership looks like in a town that can't afford failure," she said. Maycon took the list as if it weighed more than paper. "Okay," he answered simply. That night, Maycon stayed late, long after the lights in most offices dimmed. He walked through the clinic, noting what was worn, what was missing, what was patched. He spoke to the night nurse, listened to complaints without defending himself. He reviewed budgets and found waste where the board claimed there was none. And when the same unknown city number called again, he didn't ignore it. He stepped into the hallway, answered, and his voice dropped into steel. "No," he said. "I'm not coming back." Ava heard him through the thin wall near the chart station. She didn't mean to. It wasn't curiosity. It was survival. She caught only fragments. "I'm staying," and "This is my decision," and "Stop calling." For a moment, Ava's hand froze above a clipboard. Then she forced herself to move again, because she refused to let one good decision rewrite years. People could do the right thing once and still be dangerous, but her heartbeat didn't fully settle, and she hated that too. The next day, a donation request arrived from a local foundation. Maycon forwarded it to Ava with one line: "Your outreach program deserves this." Ava stared at the email longer than she wanted to admit. Not because she was grateful, because she was suspicious of kindness that looked strategic. She had learned to question gifts because gifts had once been used to soften her boundaries. But this didn't come with a compliment. It didn't come with a conversation. It came quietly, like an action meant to stand on its own. That evening, Ava walked out into the snow alone, pulling her coat tight. She stood for a second beneath the clinic's front light, watching flakes spiral down. Inside, she could still feel the board's pressure, still feel the town's needs, still feel Maycon's presence. The past hadn't returned gently. It had returned with authority and a title. Yet something had shifted in ways she didn't want to name. Maycon had been given a chance to choose power again. And he hadn't. Ava exhaled into the cold, and the breath looked like a confession she refused to speak aloud. The snow eased overnight, leaving the town wrapped in a quiet, brittle calm. Morning light turned the streets pale, as if the world had been rinsed clean. Inside the clinic, nothing felt clean. Not with the board circling. Ava arrived before sunrise, coat still damp from the cold. She reviewed charts with the same focus she used to seal wounds. But her mind kept circling one thought she refused to feed. If Maycon stayed when it cost him, that would mean something. By 8:03 a.m., the board's next move arrived in Ava's inbox. Not a request, not a discussion, a directive disguised as strategy. Immediate review of department leadership structure. Ava read it once, then again, feeling the quiet burn rise under her ribs. They weren't restructuring the clinic. They were testing control. And the fastest way to control a mission was to weaken the person protecting it. Ava didn't flinch. She printed the email and walked straight to Maycon's office. Maycon was on a call when she entered. Voice low, expression tight. He hung up quickly, as if he'd been waiting for her knock all morning. Ava placed the printed email on his desk, flat and final. "They're coming for my department," she said. Maycon scanned it, and his jaw hardened. "They're coming for the clinic," he corrected. "You're just the doorway." Ava held his gaze for a beat. "So what do you do when they try to break the doorway?" Maycon didn't answer with speeches. He reached for his laptop. He opened budgets, contracts, donor communications, everything the board preferred hidden. Ava watched him work, fast and quiet, and hated how competent it was. Competence had always been his armor. The difference now was what he used it for. "I need 2 hours," he said. "Then we meet them." Ava's voice stayed steady. "I've met men like them. They don't negotiate with truth. They negotiate with pressure." At noon, the board meeting was scheduled to be informal. Informal meant they expected compliance. Ava walked into the room with her shoulders squared and her file folder thick. Maycon walked beside her, not a step ahead. Board members smiled like they were greeting a problem they planned to solve. The president spoke first, tone warm. "We value Dr. Hart's work immensely." Ava already knew the knife was coming. Compliments were how they sharpened it. A woman in a tailored suit slid a new document across the table. "New oversight measures," she said, "to ensure consistency." Ava skimmed the first page and felt her pulse quicken. They wanted her decisions signed off by committee. They wanted her budget reduced by a number chosen for optics, not need. They wanted her leadership turned into a decorative title. Ava lifted her gaze, voice cool. "This will slow patient care." The woman smiled. "It will make patient care accountable." Another board member leaned back, eyes on Maycon. "We brought you in to modernize," he said. "This clinic needs a different direction." Maycon's expression remained neutral. Different from what? He asked. Different from charity, the man answered. Like the word tasted bad. Ava's hands tightened around her folder. Maycon held the silence for a beat, letting the ugliness sit in the room. Then he spoke, calm but unmistakable. This clinic exists because of charity, and because of Dr. Hart. Ava's breath caught, just once, because she hadn't expected her name to be said like a boundary. The president's smile stiffened. We're not questioning Dr. Hart's competence, he insisted. We're simply exploring leadership adjustments that may improve stability. Ava's voice sharpened. Stability for whom? The room went quiet. Maycon placed a folder on the table, his folder thicker than theirs. I reviewed the financials, he said, and I reviewed the contracts. A board member's eyes narrowed. You weren't asked to do that. Maycon's tone didn't change. I'm the director. I ask now. He slid copies of reports forward. Supplier overcharges, unnecessary consulting fees, inflated admin spending. Numbers the board had hidden behind the word optimization. Ava watched, stunned despite herself. Maycon didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the board. If we need to cut, he said, we start here, not with patient programs. The woman in the tailored suit went pale with irritation. You're accusing us of mismanagement, she snapped. Maycon nodded once. I'm stating facts. Ava felt the room tilt. This wasn't politics. This was war. The president's voice dropped, losing warmth. Be careful, Dr. Maycon. That warning wasn't subtle. It was a door being pointed at. Ava recognized it instantly. The moment power offers exile. She glanced at Maycon, expecting him to recalibrate, to soften, to retreat. That's what men who feared losing everything always did. But Macon's face stayed still, and his voice stayed even. I've been careful my whole life, he said. That's why I hurt people I loved. The sentence landed like a confession no one asked for, and Ava's throat tightened against her will. He continued, not louder, just firmer. I won't be careful with ethics, he said. Not anymore. The board members exchanged looks, calculating, threatened. The woman in the tailored suit leaned in. Then perhaps you're not the right fit. Macon's answer came without hesitation. If protecting this clinic makes me the wrong fit, I'll wear that. Ava's fingers loosened around her folder. She hated how that line pulled at something inside her, because it sounded like the man she once believed existed. The meeting ended with forced smiles and promises to review findings. In board language, that meant, we'll come back harder. As Ava and Maycon walked out, the president called Macon's name. Maycon stopped. Ava didn't. She kept walking, as if refusing to witness the private damage. But the hallway walls were thin and the clinic was quiet. You're making enemies, the president murmured. Macon's voice was low. Then they should have been honest. And Dr. Hart? The president asked, like Ava was a lever to pull. Is she worth this? Ava's step faltered for half a beat. Just enough for the question to find her. Maycon didn't answer immediately. In the space of that pause lived every memory Ava feared. The old Maycon would have calculated, weighed, protected himself. But the new Maycon exhaled slowly, as if deciding something out loud. Yes, he said. One word. Clean. Absolute. Ava kept walking, but her chest tightened like she'd been struck. The word wasn't romantic, it was dangerous. It was a choice. The clinic tested that choice the same evening. A pipe burst in the outreach wing, flooding half the hallway. Staff scrambled. Patients had to be rerouted. Supplies were at risk. Ava stepped into chaos the way she always did, solving, directing, absorbing. Maycon appeared with rolled sleeves, helping move equipment, speaking to maintenance, calling vendors. No cameras, no praise, just work. Ava watched him from across the hall and she couldn't tell what unsettled her more, his effort or the fact that it wasn't performative. Later, as the last patient was moved, Ava found him carrying boxes of supplies himself. City hands weren't supposed to do that. Directors weren't supposed to sweat. Maycon set the boxes down carefully and wiped his forehead with his sleeve. Ava's voice came out controlled. You didn't have to do that. He looked at her, eyes tired but steady. "Yes, I did," he replied. Ava's expression didn't change. "Why?" Maycon hesitated, then chose honesty without decoration. "Because leaving was always easier than staying," he said. "And I'm tired of being that man." Silence stretched between them, filled with water dripping somewhere down the hall. Ava's heart beat harder than she wanted. She wanted to dismiss him. She wanted to protect her peace, but the truth was cruel. Part of her had once begged him to stay, and now he was saying the words she used to pray for, years too late. Ava's voice was quiet. "Staying doesn't erase what you did." Maycon nodded. "I know." His acceptance was almost worse than an excuse. That night, Ava sat alone in her office, lights off, only the desk lamp on. She reviewed patient notes, but her eyes kept drifting to nothing. She replayed the board's threats, the word yes, the way Maycon carried boxes. She hated herself for noticing, because noticing was the first crack, the first opening. And Ava had built her life on not opening. Outside her window, snow fell again, slow and relentless, like time refusing to stop. In his new office, Maycon stared at a photo he hadn't meant to find. An old staff picture tucked into a drawer, Ava years ago, younger, smiling beside him. He held it like it could burn him and heal him at the same time. He understood now that returning wasn't redemption. Redemption was proving, day after day, that he wouldn't choose escape again. And somewhere down the hall, Ava locked her office door. Not because she feared him, but because she feared the part of herself that still remembered how to hope. The storm returned the way old problems do. Quietly at first, then everywhere. Snow thickened on the clinic steps, covering yesterday's footprints in white. Inside, Ava walked into her office and found an envelope on her chair. No name, no return address, just the clinic seal stamped too neatly. She opened it with the calm of someone used to bad news. Her eyes scanned the first line and her stomach tightened. Confidential, board inquiry, director credentials review. Down the hall, Maycon had already received the same file. It sat on his desk, like a weight placed there on purpose. He didn't open it right away because he knew what it was. The board hadn't lost the meeting. They were changing the battlefield. A director who refused to obey could be removed for risk management, and the easiest way to remove him was to resurrect the city version of his life. Maycon stared at the file and felt the past push against his throat. Ava entered without knocking, folder in hand, face controlled. "They're auditing you," she said, not accusing, just stating the weather. Maycon nodded once, and his silence told her everything. He had expected this. Maybe he had feared it. Ava's gaze sharpened. "What do they know?" she asked. Maycon's jaw tightened, and for the first time his composure looked fragile. "Enough," he admitted. "They know enough to threaten me." In the city, Maycon had been praised like a machine built for excellence. He had pushed hours, outcomes, and reputations until they gleamed. But pressure always creates fractures, even in the best hands. There had been a case, one complicated, political, high profile. He hadn't been reckless, but he had been proud, and pride makes you deaf. The patient survived, yet the aftermath turned sharp with accusations and lawyers. And Maycon had chosen the same thing he always chose: control, silence, distance. Ava's voice stayed even, but her eyes didn't soften. "Did you hide something?" she asked, the way she'd ask about symptoms. Maycon looked down at his hands as if they could confess for him. "I didn't lie," he said quietly, "but I let people assume the story was over." Ava inhaled slowly, anger restrained behind discipline. "That's still hiding," she replied, and the words landed without cruelty. Maycon didn't argue because he knew she was right. That afternoon, the board demanded a closed-door session. No staff, no department heads, no Ava, just Maycon and the people who owned the signatures. Maycon walked in alone, coat damp with melting snow. The president greeted him with a smile that was too polite to be human. "We've received concerns," he began, tapping the file with one finger. "Concerns about your history." Maycon sat down without flinching because flinching was what they wanted. A woman in the tailored suit leaned forward, voice sweet. "We can protect you," she said, like protection was a leash. "All it takes is cooperation." Quiet cooperation. Maycon's eyes narrowed slightly. Define cooperation, he said. She slid a second document across the table. It was an agreement. Public statement, controlled narrative, and a new clause. A clause limiting Ava's departmental authority for oversight. The board member with the polished nails smiled. We don't want your reputation harmed, she said. But scandals follow resistance. Maycon's stomach turned because he understood the bargain perfectly. They would bury his past if he gave them Ava's future. He could keep his title, keep the clinic, keep the illusion of power. All he had to do was let them put chains on the woman who held the mission, and Maycon realized this was the real test. Not the budgets, not the speeches, but his spine. He stared at the clause until the words blurred into a memory. Ava years ago, younger, standing in a hallway waiting for him to choose courage. He had chosen escape then because escape let him keep his image intact. This board was offering him the same exit, dressed as strategy. Maycon looked up, and his voice came out calm, almost gentle. I'm not signing anything that weakens patient care, he said. The tailored suit woman's smile faded. Then you leave us no choice. Maycon stood slowly, not dramatic, just decided. Do what you have to do, he replied. I'll do what I have to do. The president's tone turned cold. You'll be removed, he warned. And we'll make sure the town knows why. Maycon nodded once, absorbing the threat like a diagnosis. You can take my job, he said, but you won't take the clinic's soul. He walked out before they could see his hands shaking. Ava found him in the hallway near the supply room alone. He looked steady until she got close enough to see the tension in his jaw. They tried to trade you, he said quietly, as if the words disgusted him. Ava's eyes hardened. And what did you do? She asked. Maycon didn't hesitate. I refused, he said. Completely. Ava held his gaze, searching for performance, for manipulation, for the catch. There wasn't one, and that unsettled her more than a lie would have. The board moved fast after that because power hates delays. By evening, an email circulated. Interim review of director appointment. Staff whispered in corridors, confusion sharpening into fear. Ava heard her name in those whispers, paired with his, like a rumor with teeth. She walked through the clinic with her head high, refusing to be the story. But inside, something churned, because she knew what boards did to inconvenient leaders. They broke them publicly so no one else dared resist. The next day, the reporter returned, this time with a camera. She stood outside the clinic entrance, scarf pulled tight, eyes bright with hunger. Dr. Maycon, she called. Is it true there's an investigation into your past? Staff stopped. Patients stared. Even the snow seemed to pause. Maycon stepped outside before anyone else could answer for him. Ava watched from behind the glass, heart hammering against reason. This was the moment men protected themselves, by throwing someone else into the storm. Maycon faced the camera without smiling. Yes, he said, voice clear enough to cut through wind. I'm being reviewed and I welcome it. The reporter blinked, surprised by the lack of denial. Were patients harmed? She pressed, and her tone sharpened like accusation. Maycon exhaled once, then chose the hardest truth available. I made decisions I'm not proud of, he admitted. Not reckless decisions, human ones. And I've spent years trying to outrun them. Ava's breath caught behind the glass. He was confessing without excuses, without theater, without blaming anyone else. The reporter leaned in, greedy for fire. Why come here now? She asked. Maycon's gaze lifted toward the clinic sign, then lowered again. Because this place matters, he said, and because I'm done running. The reporter tried to bait him. Is Dr. Ava Hart the reason? Maycon didn't look toward Ava's window. He didn't use her as proof. That's private, he said simply, and it stays that way. When he walked back inside, the clinic felt different, not safer, just more honest, like the air had been scrubbed raw. Ava met him near the hallway, expression controlled, eyes too bright with unspoken thought. You didn't have to say that, she said, voice low. Maycon shook his head once. Yes, I did, he replied. Ava's throat tightened with something she refused to name. Why? She asked anyway, because part of her needed to hear the answer. Maycon held her gaze, and there was no charm in him now. No polished director, no city armor, just a man choosing the harder path. "Because hiding is what ruined me," he said quietly. "And because I won't use you to save my reputation." Ava's eyes flickered, the smallest crack in her control. She looked away first, not in weakness, but in self-defense. Trust was not a door she opened without proof, and proof had to be consistent. That night, Ava stayed late, reviewing cases with a mind that wouldn't settle. Outside, the snow reflected the streetlights like scattered gold. Inside, the clinic hummed with its usual exhaustion and duty. Ava stood by her office window watching Maycon's car still parked outside. He hadn't left. He hadn't escaped. He hadn't chosen the easy road. And somewhere in the quiet, Ava felt a dangerous thought rise like warmth under ice. If he can lose everything and still stay, then maybe the man who left her isn't the man standing here now. The clinic quieted after midnight, the way hospitals do when the town finally sleeps. Lights dimmed in the hallways, leaving long shadows on the floor. Ava sat alone in her office, desk lamp on, charts stacked neatly. She had tried to focus on lab results, on discharge notes, on anything measurable. But the day kept replaying. Maycon outside in the snow telling the truth without using her. It should have meant nothing. It should have been too late. Yet her heartbeat didn't listen to logic the way her mind did. A soft knock came at her door. One tap, then another. Respectful. Ava didn't answer right away. She didn't want to invite the past into her room. But she already knew who it was. The air had changed before the sound arrived. "Come in," she said finally. Voice steady, eyes still on the paper in front of her. Maycon stepped inside, holding himself like a man who'd learned caution the hard way. He didn't close the door. He didn't step too close. He simply stood there, hands at his sides as if he'd come without weapons. "I'm not here to keep you," he said quietly. Ava's pen paused. She set it down with deliberate calm. "You already did that once," she replied. "Not cruel, just honest." Maycon's jaw tightened, then released as if he accepted the cut. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here." Ava leaned back slightly, eyes sharp. "Make it quick," she told him. Maycon nodded once. "I owe you a conversation I never gave you." For a moment, Ava didn't breathe properly. Not because she wanted his words, because she'd buried the need for them. She had told herself closure was a myth people used to stay attached. She had built a life that didn't require explanations from men who left. But the truth sat under her ribs like a stubborn splinter. He had vanished. He had let silence do the breaking, and she had carried the pieces alone. Maycon spoke without rehearsed softness. "When the promotion came," he began, "I told myself it was for our future." Ava's eyes didn't soften. "It wasn't," she said. He nodded. "No," he admitted. "It wasn't." His honesty was blunt enough to sting. "It was for me." Ava's fingers tightened on the arm of her chair. "Then say it," she demanded quietly. "Say what you really chose." Maycon swallowed, and the motion looked like pain. "I chose the version of myself I could control," he said. "I chose the city because it didn't require vulnerability, only performance." He exhaled slowly. "With you, I had to be real, and that terrified me." Ava stared at him as if she were looking at a wound he'd finally uncovered. "You were terrified," she repeated, voice flat. "So you left me?" Maycon's eyes lowered. "Yes." Silence filled the room, heavy and clean. Ava stood up, not pacing, just needing distance from the desk that suddenly felt too small. She moved toward the window, arms crossing over her chest like armor. Outside, snow drifted under streetlights, quiet and indifferent. "You don't get to call that fear," Ava said, voice tight. "That was cruelty." Maycon didn't argue. "I know," he replied, and the softness in his tone wasn't self-pity. It was remorse without escape. Ava turned to face him, and her eyes were sharp enough to cut. "You didn't even end it," she said. "You disappeared." Maycon flinched slightly, but he stayed. "I thought if I spoke it out loud, I'd become the villain," he admitted. So I waited. I delayed. I told myself time would soften it. Ava laughed once. Short, bitter, controlled. Time didn't soften it. Time just made me bleed alone longer. Maycon's voice dropped. I'm sorry. Ava's jaw clenched. Don't. Not like that. He took a small step forward, then stopped himself. I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight, he said. I'm not asking you for anything. Ava's eyes narrowed. Then why are you here? Maycon hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. Not new, worn at the edges like it had been carried too long. He held it out, not forcing it into her hand. Because I owe you the truth. And I owe you this. Ava stared at the envelope, throat tightening. What is it? She asked, voice guarded. Maycon's eyes held steady. A letter, he answered. From the night I left. Ava didn't move. The room felt suddenly too quiet, too alive. You wrote me a letter, she said slowly, disbelief slipping into her tone. Maycon nodded. I did, he said. And then I didn't give it to you. Ava's lips parted, and no sound came out at first. That's insane, she whispered, as if her mind couldn't file the truth. Maycon's voice stayed low. I wrote everything I couldn't say, and then I chose the same thing again. Silence. Ava finally took the envelope, but her fingers didn't tremble. She had cried all those tears years ago. Now she was just cold. She turned the envelope over, seeing the faint crease where it had been opened and resealed. You opened it, she said. Maycon nodded. 100 times, he admitted. Every time I thought about coming back. Every time I didn't. Ava held it like it was evidence. She didn't read it. Not yet. Instead, she looked at him with the kind of clarity that comes after surviving. Do you know what you took from me? She asked softly. Maycon's throat moved. Tell me, he said. Ava's voice sharpened. You took my ability to feel safe in love. She let the words hang, because they deserved space. You didn't just leave, she continued. You taught me that devotion makes you disposable. Maycon's eyes glistened, but he didn't interrupt. I'm listening, he whispered. Ava's breath came out slow. I rebuilt, she said. I climbed. I led. I did everything I was supposed to do with my pain. But there are nights, quiet nights, when I still remember the girl who waited. She stared at the floor for a beat, as if she hated that confession. Then she lifted her gaze again, sharper, and I promised myself she would never be humiliated like that again. Maycon nodded once, a small movement full of weight. She shouldn't have been, he said. Ava's voice didn't soften. So don't ask for her back. Maycon's face tightened and Ava expected him to retreat. But he stayed, shoulders squared, taking the truth like penance. I'm not asking for her, he said. I'm asking for the chance to know who you are now. Ava's eyes narrowed. That sounds poetic, she replied. Poetry isn't proof. Maycon's answer was immediate. Then I'll prove it with consistency, he said. Ava watched him, testing his tone for entitlement. There was none. Consistent how? She asked, because she refused to be vague. Maycon spoke like a man making a plan, not a promise. I'll be transparent with the board, he said. No more hiding. I'll protect your department and your authority, even if it costs my job. I'll do the work that doesn't get applause. Funding, staffing, repairs, nights like this. He swallowed. And I'll stop running when things get uncomfortable. Ava stared at him, unimpressed on purpose. That's what you should have been the first time, she said. Maycon nodded. I know, he replied. That's why I'm doing it now. His voice broke slightly on the last word, not for drama, but because it hurt to be late. Ava looked down at the envelope again. It felt heavier than paper should. I'm not reading this tonight, she said. Maycon didn't flinch. You don't have to, he replied. Ava's voice turned colder, protective. And I'm not giving you anything tonight. Maycon nodded again, accepting the boundary. I'm not asking, he said. He stepped back toward the door, leaving space like an apology. But before he turned the handle, he spoke one more sentence. Quiet, final. I'm sorry I made you strong in the worst way. The door closed softly behind him. Ava stood alone in the lamplight, envelope in her hand, heart refusing to settle. She hated him for being honest now. She hated herself for feeling anything. She sat slowly at her desk and stared at the envelope as if it might bite. Then she slid her finger under the seal, carefully, like a surgeon opening a wound. The paper inside unfolded with a whisper. Ava's eyes found the first line, and the room seemed to lose oxygen. She didn't make it past the first paragraph before her throat tightened. Not because the letter was romantic, because it was truthful, too truthful for a man who had been such a coward. Her hand clenched around the paper and she forced herself to keep reading. Outside, snow drifted under the streetlight like time falling gently, indifferent to pain. Inside, Ava felt the past cracking open, not to destroy her, but to demand a verdict. And somewhere down the hall, Maycon stood in the dark hallway for a moment, not expecting forgiveness, only choosing, for once, not to run. The next days moved like winter does, slow on the outside, relentless underneath. Snow melted into slush, then froze again, turning sidewalks into hidden traps. Inside the clinic, the atmosphere shifted in quieter ways. Maycon stopped being a headline and became a presence. Steady, early, consistent. Ava noticed the pattern even when she tried not to. He didn't demand conversations. He didn't corner her with apologies. He simply stayed where he said he would stay. The town noticed too. Small towns always do. A director from the city was not normal news, and neither was his past. Whispers slipped through the waiting room, traveled past the reception desk, climbed stairwells. Patients asked nurses if the clinic would be sold. A volunteer asked if the outreach program was safe. A donor left a voicemail. "We support Dr. Hart. Don't let them silence her." Ava listened without reacting, but her spine tightened. Being watched had never been her weakness. Being targeted was. Maycon called a staff meeting the following morning, short and direct. No speeches, no ego, no dramatic promises. He stood at the front with a simple folder, sleeves rolled, voice even. "The clinic's mission doesn't change," he said. "Not now, not later." He addressed funding gaps, supply chain fixes, overtime concerns. He credited Ava publicly, without turning it into a story. "Dr. Hart built what we're protecting," he stated. "We will protect it together." Ava's face stayed composed, but the room absorbed the weight of his words. After the meeting, a nurse caught Ava in the hallway, eyes bright with relief. "I've never seen a director say that out loud," she whispered. Ava replied with her usual restraint. "Words are easy," she said, but her voice wasn't as sharp as it used to be. Because Maycon's words were being followed by actions. He was meeting vendors himself, reviewing contracts line by line. He was cutting waste in administration, not in patient care. Ava saw it in spreadsheets and in tired staff faces that looked slightly less hopeless. The board did not like the shift. That week, a formal letter arrived demanding Ava's attendance at a performance review. Ava read it once, then folded it neatly, refusing to show anger. Performance reviews were for control, not improvement. It wasn't about her metrics. Her outcomes were exceptional. It was about teaching the clinic what happens when you don't stay quiet. Maycon walked into her office mid-afternoon and saw the letter on her desk. His eyes hardened. "They're escalating," he said. Ava didn't look up from her chart. "They were always going to," she replied. Maycon's voice dropped. "You shouldn't go alone." Ava finally met his gaze. Sharp, warning. "I'm not your responsibility," she said. Maycon nodded, accepting the boundary without stepping back from the truth. "I know," he replied, "but I won't let them isolate you." Ava's jaw tightened because isolation was exactly how she'd survived him, and he was trying to undo it, carefully, without forcing his hands into her life. The day of the review, the sky turned the color of unspoken threats. Ava wore a simple coat, hair pulled back, face calm. She walked into the boardroom like she belonged there, because she did. Maycon waited outside the door, not invited, not needed, but present. Inside, the board members smiled like polished knives. The president opened with the same ritual: praise, gratitude, community impact. Then the woman in the tailored suit slid a folder across the table. "Concerns," she said softly. About your leadership approach. Ava didn't touch the folder. State your concerns, she said, voice level. The board member with polished nails leaned forward. Some staff feel your standards are intimidating, she said. Ava's eyes narrowed slightly. My standards keep patients alive, she replied. Another board member added, You've been resistant to oversight. Ava held the silence for a beat, then spoke with surgical clarity. Oversight is not the same as interference, she said. And interference costs lives. Their smiles didn't falter, but their eyes sharpened. They wanted her reactive. Then came the real line, delivered casually, like a favor. We believe the clinic needs a more collaborative culture, the president said, and perhaps a different departmental head, someone who aligns with the board's vision. Ava's pulse hit her throat, but her face stayed still. She had known this was coming. Still, hearing it out loud felt like being hit. She leaned back slightly, voice quiet. If you remove me, the department collapses for months, she said. The tailored suit woman shrugged. That's a risk we're willing to take. Ava realized in that second, they weren't protecting the clinic. They were trying to own it. The door opened behind her before she could respond. Maycon stepped in. The room stiffened. The president's smile wavered. This is a closed session, he snapped. Maycon didn't apologize. He didn't smile. He didn't soften. He placed a new folder on the table, thicker than theirs again. It's closed, he agreed. That's why I'm here. Ava turned her head slightly, eyes sharp with warning. Don't make this personal. Maycon met her gaze once, then returned to the board. I have documentation, he said, showing repeated attempts to undermine clinical leadership for non-clinical reasons. The tailored suit woman's face went cold. That's an accusation, she said. Maycon nodded. It's a report, he corrected. Prepared for legal counsel. The board president leaned forward, voice low. You're threatening us. Macon's answer was calm enough to be terrifying. I'm informing you, he replied. So you can stop. Ava's chest tightened, because this wasn't a man defending a woman to impress her. This was a director protecting a mission at the cost of his career, and she could feel how dangerous that choice was. The board tried to pivot, to corner Ava again. Dr. Hart has personal conflict with you, the president said to Maycon, eyes gleaming. A history, another member added, as if gossip were evidence. Ava's stomach tightened, because she had feared this, their past weaponized. Maycon didn't flinch. My history is irrelevant to patient outcomes, he said. And Dr. Hart's outcomes are exceptional. He turned his gaze toward Ava, respectful, not possessive. This clinic is safer because she leads, he stated simply. Ava swallowed hard, refusing to let emotion rise into her eyes. The boardroom fell quiet, a silence filled with calculations. Ava could almost see the board members adjusting strategy in real time. They had expected Maycon to use her, or distance himself, or sacrifice her quietly. Instead, he had entered the room and put his own neck on the table. The tailored suit woman sat back, eyes narrowed. We will revisit this, she said, voice tight. With proper channels. Maycon nodded. Do, he replied, and include legal. I insist. Ava realized the board had just been forced to step back, at least for now. Outside the boardroom, Ava stopped in the hallway, face controlled, breath shallow. Maycon stood a few feet away, giving her space. You shouldn't have done that, Ava said quietly. Her voice wasn't anger. It was fear, wrapped in discipline. Maycon nodded once. I know, he replied. That's why I did it. Ava's jaw clenched. They'll come for you harder now, she warned. Maycon's gaze stayed steady. Let them, he said. I'm done trading people for safety. Ava looked away, because if she looked too long, she might believe him. That evening, the town's rumor mill exploded. Someone had seen Maycon enter the closed session. Someone had heard raised voices. Someone posted online. They tried to fire Dr. Ava Hart. New director shut it down. Patients commented. Staff shared. Donors reposted. Ava sat in her office, scrolling once, then locking her phone. Being protected publicly was not something she knew how to carry. It made her feel exposed, like the whole town had eyes on the wound she kept hidden. Maycon faced the attention differently. He didn't fuel it. He didn't deny it. He simply increased his presence in the clinic, walking floors, listening, fixing. He met with donors quietly, secured emergency funding for outreach. He drafted a formal mission statement protecting departmental autonomy. Ava read the draft late at night alone and felt her throat tighten. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was practical. A love story would have been easier to dismiss. This was infrastructure. Near midnight, Ava walked through the empty corridor and found Maycon in the outreach wing. He was kneeling beside a broken cabinet hinge, screwdriver in hand, coat off, sleeves rolled. A director fixing a cabinet at midnight looked almost absurd. Ava stopped, arms crossed, voice quiet. "You should go home," she said. Maycon didn't look up right away. "I will," he replied, tightening the screw. Ava watched him for a moment, then asked the question she hated herself for asking. "Why are you doing all this?" Maycon finally looked up, eyes tired and honest. "Because I'm learning what staying costs," he said, "and I'm paying it." Ava stood there, the cold hallway air brushing her cheeks. She wanted to tell him that cost wasn't proof yet. She wanted to tell him that one day of courage didn't erase years of damage. But she also knew something else now, something she didn't like. He wasn't trying to win her with charm. He wasn't performing redemption. He was building it quietly, in places no one would film. Ava turned away first, as she always did, and walked down the hallway with steady steps. Yet inside her chest, under layers of ice, something shifted. Small, dangerous, alive. The board didn't wait long to strike back. Winter had barely shifted when the next letter arrived. Formal, stamped, final. It wasn't sent to Ava. It was sent to everyone. A memo posted on the clinic's internal bulletin. Emergency governance session. Staff read it in silence, faces tightening as if they'd felt this before. Ava stood at the nurse's station, eyes fixed on the paper, expression controlled. She didn't need to read between lines to understand the message. They were coming to take control. Maycon found Ava minutes later, not rushing but moving with intention. "They're calling a vote," he said quietly. Ava's gaze remained steady. "To remove you," she replied. Maycon nodded. "And to restructure your department the moment I'm gone." Ava's jaw tightened. "Then they're not just coming for us," she said. "They're coming for the patients." Maycon exhaled slowly. "That's why I asked legal to prepare," he answered. Ava watched him, measuring. "Prepared how?" Maycon's eyes met hers. "For the only move that ends this." The emergency session was scheduled for that evening. Outside, snow began again. Thin, sharp, wind-driven, like the town itself was holding its breath. Inside the clinic, the mood turned brittle. Nurses whispered about layoffs. Volunteers asked if outreach would close. Ava walked from room to room with a calm that looked almost cruel. But every step carried the weight of a truth she hated. She could lose everything she built, and the man who once left her was now at the center of the storm. Hours before the meeting, Maycon called a brief staff huddle. He didn't mention romance, history, or rumors. He spoke like a director who understood what mattered. "No matter what happens tonight," he said, voice even, "patient care continues." He outlined backup plans, who covered what, where supplies moved, how to protect outreach assets. It wasn't inspiring. It was strategic. And that strategy calmed the room. Ava watched from the back, arms crossed, feeling something tighten in her chest against her will. When the huddle ended, Ava followed Maycon into his office. The door closed softly behind them, sealing out the clinic's noise. Ava didn't sit. She stood by the window, staring at the parking lot lights. "Tell me what you're planning," she said. Maycon held her gaze. Careful, respectful. "If they vote me out, they'll own the clinic by morning," he replied. Ava's voice stayed cold. "And you're going to stop that, how?" Maycon's answer came without hesitation. "By making sure they can't." He slid a folder across the desk, thick, clean, prepared. Ava opened it and saw drafted documents, donation agreements, legal filings, a governance complaint. And one page that made her breath catch. A resignation letter. Ava's eyes snapped up. "You're resigning?" Maycon's expression didn't change. "If I stay under them, I become their tool," he said. Ava's voice sharpened. "If you leave, they win." Maycon nodded once. "Not if I leave the right way." Ava stared at him, suspicion rising. "Explain." Maycon pointed to the legal filing. "Your outreach program has donors willing to protect it. If the board's authority is challenged," he said, "and if the clinic's governance is exposed publicly, they lose credibility." Ava scanned the language, sharp and precise. "You prepared all of this without telling me," she said. Maycon's voice softened. "Because I didn't want your name attached until you chose," he replied. Ava's throat tightened. "You're trying to protect me," she accused, like it was a flaw. Maycon didn't deny it. "I'm trying to protect what you built," he corrected. Ava turned away, pacing once, then stopping. "This is still your mess," she said. "They'll make it about your past, about your investigation." Macon's jaw set. "Then I'll give them what they want," he said. Ava froze. "What does that mean?" Maycon met her eyes. "I'll stop fighting to look clean," he answered. "I'll be honest, publicly, about what happened in the city and what I learned." Ava's voice dropped. "That could destroy your career." Macon's reply was quiet, steady. "It already did the moment I decided to stop running." For a second, Ava didn't know what to do with that. She had spent years believing men like him only sacrificed when it benefited them. But there was no benefit here, only cost. "Why now?" she asked, and her voice betrayed something softer beneath the steel. Maycon didn't reach for her, didn't step closer. "Because the first time, I chose the version of myself that felt safe," he said. "And I've hated that man ever since." Ava's chest tightened. She looked down at the resignation letter again as if it were a threat. That evening, the boardroom filled fast. Board members arrived in sharp coats, confident smiles, and polished language. The president sat at the head like a man who believed outcomes belonged to him. Ava sat near the end, posture straight, face unreadable. Maycon sat across from the president, hands calm on the table. The tailored suit woman opened a folder and slid it forward. "We move to vote on the director's appointment," she said, voice sweet with certainty. The president began with rehearsed disappointment. "Dr. Maycon has been disruptive," he said. "He's created instability." Ava kept her gaze forward, refusing to react, refusing to participate in theater. The board member with polished nails added, "His history also raises reputational concerns." The words hung in the room like smoke. Maycon didn't flinch. "Yes," he said, and the room stiffened at the simple agreement. Then he leaned forward slightly. "And I'm going to tell you the truth you've been trying to use as leverage." Ava's pulse jumped, but her face didn't move. Maycon spoke clearly, without drama, without excuses. He named the city case in measured terms, acknowledged where pride and fear had shaped his choices. He admitted that he had used success to avoid vulnerability. He didn't blame a hospital. He didn't blame a team. He didn't hide behind titles. "I've spent years trying to outrun my own character," he said. "That ends here." The board members exchanged startled looks. This wasn't the script. Then Maycon turned the room toward the real issue. "While you've been fixated on my reputation," he said, "you've been draining this clinic through inflated contracts." He slid his evidence forward. Reports, invoices, communications. The tailored suit woman's face tightened, but Maycon continued. "You attempted to trade my silence for Dr. Hart's authority," he stated. Ava felt heat rise behind her ribs, sharp and protective. Maycon didn't look at her. He kept it about the mission. "I refused," he said. "And I documented everything." The president tried to regain control. "This is inappropriate," he snapped. Macon's voice remained even. "It's accountability," he replied. A board member barked. "You're done here." Maycon nodded once, then did the last thing the board expected. "I agree," he said quietly. "I am done." He placed his resignation letter on the table and pushed it forward. Gasps flickered in the room, small, stunned sounds. Ava's throat tightened, but she stayed perfectly still. The president's eyes lit with victory. "Accepted," he said too quickly. Maycon didn't react to the speed. "Of course," he replied. Then he stood and looked at the board like a man who had already chosen consequence. "My resignation takes effect immediately," he said. "And so does the legal filing." He glanced at the tailored suit woman. "Your contracts are under review." He looked at the president. "And donors have been informed." The president's face drained of color. "You can't do this," he hissed. Maycon's answer was calm. "I already did." Ava felt something shift in the room. The board's power had just been publicly wounded. Outside the boardroom, the clinic's hallway felt too bright, too exposed. Ava walked fast, not because she was running, because she needed air. Maycon followed at a distance, not reaching, not calling her name. Ava stopped near the glass doors where snow swirled under the lights. She turned, finally letting her eyes meet his without the shield of professionalism. "You just set fire to your career," she said, voice low. Maycon nodded. "Yes," he replied, "because I'm not letting them set fire to this clinic. Or to you." Ava's throat tightened. "Why?" she asked again, like the answer had to be different this time. Maycon held her gaze and there was no charm left in him. Only truth. "Because love without courage is just comfort," he said. "And I've lived my whole life choosing comfort over courage." Ava's breath hitched. Quiet. Involuntary. "I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight," he continued. "I'm not asking you to give me anything." He swallowed once, the only sign of emotion breaking through. "I'm telling you that this time, I stayed, even when it cost me everything." Ava stared at him, and for a second her composure cracked. Not into tears, but into rawness. She stepped closer, one slow step, measured, deliberate. Not a surrender. A decision. "You don't get to come back and be a hero," Ava said, voice shaking just slightly. Maycon didn't argue. "I know," he replied. Ava's eyes held his. "But you can be a man who stays." Silence fell between them, filled with snow and breath and years of damage. Then Ava lifted a hand and touched his coat sleeve. Light, brief, real. And Maycon didn't move like he was claiming her. He stood like someone finally learning how to be chosen. The next morning, the clinic looked the same from the outside. Snow on the steps, pale sunlight on the windows, the quiet breath of a town waking up. But inside, everything felt different. Not easier, not lighter. Just rearranged, as if a storm had finally passed through the building and taken the lies with it. The board tried to recover quickly. They always did. Calls were made, emails flew, meetings were demanded. But once legal filings existed and donors had been notified, the game changed. Power didn't disappear. It just became careful. The clinic wasn't safe yet, but it was no longer defenseless. And for the first time in a long time, Ava felt something rare in her chest. A cautious, unfamiliar relief. Ava returned to work the way she always did, without fanfare. Patients still needed care. Nurses still needed support. Charts still needed signatures. But the staff looked at her differently now, not because she had won a war, but because she had survived it without losing who she was. In the hallway, someone whispered, "She's still here." And that sentence carried the kind of reverence people reserve for miracles. Maycon, meanwhile, didn't have an office anymore. His name wasn't on a plaque. His title wasn't protecting him. He became overnight what he had feared his whole life. A man with nothing but his choices. And yet he showed up anyway. Early, quiet, steady, because staying had finally become more important than being admired. He spent his days in the places he used to avoid. The outreach wing, the supply room, the waiting area where people looked at him with suspicion instead of applause. He carried boxes. He fixed what he could. He listened when staff complained. He didn't defend himself. He didn't try to be liked. He tried to be useful. For once, he wasn't building a reputation. He was rebuilding character. Ava didn't reward him with softness. Not quickly. Not cheaply. She kept her boundaries like a surgeon keeps a steady hand. She didn't pretend the past didn't happen. She didn't let one sacrifice rewrite years of abandonment. And yet, day after day, she watched him choose the harder thing without being asked. One evening, after the clinic finally quieted, Ava found him outside under the front light. Snow drifted softly, landing on his shoulders like silent questions. He looked up when she approached, and his face carried the same steady humility she had started to recognize, the expression of a man who wasn't trying to win, only trying to be worthy. Ava stopped a few feet away, hands tucked into her coat pockets, breath visible in the cold. For a long moment, she didn't speak. She simply looked at him as if she were reading a case file written across years. Then she said the words that mattered. Not romantic, not dramatic, but real. I don't know if I can love you the way I did before. Her voice didn't shake, but it carried truth like weight. That woman, she's gone. Maycon nodded once, accepting it without argument. I know, he said. I'm not asking for her. Ava's eyes held his. But I can respect the man you're choosing to be now. The sentence landed like a door unlocking by one small click. Maycon's throat moved, emotion contained. That's more than I deserve, he whispered. Ava didn't soften. It's what you've earned, she corrected. He didn't reach for her. He didn't step closer and try to turn it into a scene. He just stood there, letting the moment be quiet, letting her lead. And Ava realized something that frightened her. This was the first time she felt safe near him, not because the past had been erased, but because the present was finally honest. Ava took one step forward, slow and deliberate. She lifted her hand and rested it lightly against his chest, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath his coat. If you run again, she said, voice low, eyes sharp. You don't get to come back. Maycon didn't hesitate. I won't run, he answered. Not like a promise for romance, like a vow to himself. The snow fell between them like a soft curtain. Ava exhaled, then did something she hadn't done in years. She let herself choose. She leaned in and pressed a brief, quiet kiss to his cheek. Not a reunion, not forgiveness, but a beginning. Maycon closed his eyes for a second, absorbing it like grace he didn't deserve. And in that small town, under winter light, something rare took shape. Not a love built on butterflies or perfect timing, but a love built on accountability, on showing up, on staying when it's inconvenient, on protecting what matters without asking for applause. Because the kind of love that changes a life isn't the one that arrives loudly. It's the one that returns humbled, the one that pays the cost, the one that doesn't demand a second chance, but becomes a man who deserves one. If this story touched something in you, if you believe real love is proven in actions, subscribe to Redeemed Hearts now, like the video, and comment, I choose peace, so I know you stayed until the end.